Okay, and we are live, I think. Broadcasting today from Stony Creek, and our internet is, we're taking internet from across the road and all across the driveway, so our internet might not be that good. But I'm back in Stony Creek. This is the living room. And this with me is David Holmes, who is a good friend and Dharma practitioner. I think of him as one of the wise people that I know, and he's got great things to share. And I haven't thought of having him on because he's been dealing with some things that actually make him a very interesting person to interview, and which hopefully he'll tell you something about. But so tonight is our weekly Sirimangalo International Presents show, where we try to interview someone who we think will have something interesting to say, and put all sorts of pressure on him to say interesting things, and answer all the questions that all of you posed to him. Everyone be courteous, kind, and thankful that David has kindly agreed to talk with us tonight. So welcome, David.
Thank you.
And with me is Robin, who's going to help conduct the interview. So to start us off, David, I'd like to ask you to tell us about, I'd like to start at the beginning. Tell us about how you got into Buddhism, way back when.
Yeah, that was in 1960, I think, when I first went to university. I went with the idea that I was going to be a geographer. I wanted to do geology, but I wasn't good enough in science, but I was very good in geography, and I thought that's what I would do. When I got there, I found that from the very first week, I was involved with the people from the philosophy department. And I was taking comparative religion, where one of the main parts, of course, was about Buddhism. And my mind just changed. And after one semester, I switched in to the philosophy department. And in that philosophy department, I got a very good grounding in the history of Western philosophy, metaphysics, and epistemology. But at the same time, I was interested in, there were two books that were popular in those days. One was by Alan Watts, Zen, The Way of Zen. No, I forgot what the other one was.
Two Buddhist books.
Was it by Suzuki, something Suzuki?
No, I read that too.
It's okay, so you have two books.
Anyway, this idea about Buddhism was always on the back burner. It was something I wanted to know about because when I went to university, I was a confused young man, like most of my contemporaries. I was a student leader.
Like most young men.
Yeah, I was a bit of a rebel. And I think that's one of the reasons I liked Zen. And I read a lot of books about Zen and the backgrounds of Mahayana Buddhism. But I have to admit, I didn't get very far with it in those early years.
And then you went on and you were teaching for quite a while.
Yes, at McMaster, I became most interested and involved in the existentialism courses. And in those days, you could either go in the existentialism direction or the philosophy of science direction. And I wasn't, as I said, I didn't have the interest in, or maybe even the grounding in science. And so my existentialism teacher, Dr. William Newell, sent me off to Germany to study with his recommendation. And I studied more philosophy and literature because I had to have two majors at the university in Munich, Germany. And eventually, after I'd gotten to the point where I was qualified, the University of Maryland, which had a campus in Munich, needed a teacher. Suddenly they had 300 unexpected students turn up and no faculty. And since these people knew me well, they invited me to become a teacher.
And that's where you had your first brush with death, isn't it? Wasn't it in Germany?
Oh yeah, but that was much later.
Oh, okay.
But you know, I'll talk about that now. One day, I was driving my big BMW because after I'd been teaching a while, I had money and I was able to live a more luxurious life than the one I had as a student. And I hit some black ice, and I can't remember what happened, but I hit a big oak tree, probably as wide as the car, and the car was totaled, and all my ribs were crushed. My chest was concave rather than convex, and it took me 6 months to recover. And that accident also became an important thing in my life because from that time on, I just didn't take life for granted. I had time those 6 months in the hospital.
What was that like, the first 6 months in the hospital? Like, were you practicing Buddhism by this time and like meditating during that 6 months?
Not the way you teach it.
No.
Yeah. In those days, especially in the beginning, I had so much pain and they couldn't give me any more morphine. There was nothing I could do. And they told me I had to do the breathing, to breathe out, to push the bones out so they would come back into position. And so for a few months, life was just dealing with the pain. But my mind was there, you know. It was on that one thing. It wasn't wandering all around.
And that changes you.
And yeah, that changes your way of existing. But to come back to the word existing, in philosophy, in existentialism, existence, of course, is an important thing to think about. And I think one of the reasons why we all became so unsure and full of anxiety is that existentialism made us question our existence. Our existence was a thing that popped up at the moment based on your so-called authentic decision. And you were making that happen. At that time, I hadn't made the connection, but that's close to what we do in Buddhism. We make the right action happen so the right thing will come about so that the process which evolves is healing. So let's see now, where are we? We go back to...
I skipped ahead.
What?
I skipped ahead to your accident. But before that, was there anything, like it was just a lot of years of teaching? Was there...
Oh, I know what I wanted to say. Mm-hmm. So when I got to Europe, of course, it was very, very exciting. And I got into... I'd been a jazz musician when I was in school. And I was heavy into the jazz scene. I was one of those beatniks, you know, that generation that is supposed to have died off. Right? When rock and roll came up, we kind of
Dharma bums.
accepted it as something that happened, but we never became a part of it. And so I found that instead of being in an American university somewhere doing the philosophy of science, I was off in Europe with all these existentialists who were going half crazy because they couldn't find any meaning in their lives. Their lives were full of anxiety. They didn't know where they were alive. They drank a lot. Think of young people who were unstable in mind, like Dostoevsky's Raskolnikov.
I was just talking to someone about Raskolnikov just this afternoon.
Really?
This guy with big beard and long hair came up to me, and I thought he was like a Christian who was going to try to convert me, because he said, "Would you be interested in entering into a conversation?" And I said, "Well, what's it about?" Because I didn't really have time for Christian conversion conversation. But turns out he's a bit of an existentialist, but really interesting guy. He's a philosophy major.
Yeah.
And we sat and talked for about an hour, and it got into crime and punishment, and we both agreed that the ending was a sham. But he said Dostoevsky was a great philosopher, a great psychologist, but a very poor philosopher. Anyway.
Yeah, well, he rewrote the ending because he fell in love, I think. Originally, he had a different ending, which was not so happy. And then I would mention Camus in The Stranger, where the protagonist kills somebody. I mean, that kind of existentialist thinking can make you crazy.
Yeah.
And I was surrounded by crazy people, which was another thing that I had. First of all, I didn't have good grounding when I got to university. Then I learned all this classical traditional philosophy, which is based upon reason and things that supposedly exist, that are independent, that have lasting, that have permanence. And I didn't believe any of that because it didn't fit the way I experienced life. So for a while, I was into this heavy scene of jazz nights and drinking and crazy people all around. And I really had to get out of that. But as Alan Watts said once, when I had a seminar with him many years later, somebody asked him, "What about excess?" And Alan said, "Excess is good. You can learn from it if it doesn't kill you." And I saw quite a number of people go actually in those years, which also got me to thinking. And somehow I've always been a survivor. I've always known when I've learned enough and it's time to quit. It's like having a disease and then learning how to get over it. That can be true of I never gambled or took drugs, but things like that. Sex and women. What else? What's the other thing?
Drugs.
Yeah. Sex, women.
Sex and women are the same thing.
Yeah.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Those are the three that music, sex, drugs.
Yeah, anyway, I had to grow out of that. And I suppose that accident you mentioned helped me to think about the meaning of my life.
I'm really interested in these type of people. It sounds like the whole scene, like I know the Christians I've been talking to would say, that's what happens when you give up God, right? I mean, a lot of it was this rejection of, and I'm learning in modern philosophy now, this was the questioning, does God really exist? It was a big thing that we're still grappling with. And it's interesting how, because whatever you mean by the word God is a good word to describe that which grounds you, right? That which gives you some purpose. As the argument we were discussing as well today, but I was discussing with this pastor, is people argue that, and someone left a comment who said, that pastor's right, that you only have meaning with God. God is what gives meaning to good and evil. How would you respond to that now?
Well, I think that as young people, we grew up in the West with the idea that God exists and there's something stable there that we can count on, something to believe in, something separate from our experience. And then we began to question that, because life around us didn't seem to show that.
It doesn't actually, there's no actual evidence. It doesn't fit with our experience.
And if you don't have good family and good support and good teaching, people around you who can lead you in the right direction, it's very easy to go off in this direction of doubt and uncertainty. Then you reach the point where you feel like you're going crazy.
It's interesting because it almost sounds like it's preferable for these people to stick with God, stick with the belief in an imaginary creator deity.
Well, maybe they would want to, but they can't.
They can't because it doesn't jive with experience.
Yeah.
There's no.
Well, maybe it's just the fear that God doesn't exist.
The fear that
rips away all the underpinnings of everything that they've ever been taught or believed in.
Probably the culture, the change in culture as everyone around you starts questioning it. And
that's right.
You know.
And maybe they haven't reached the point yet where they understand what an acting with in a way where you can say this is authentic existence.
I wonder if we'd say this is like Mara. You know how they say Mara is one of the high gods?
Yeah.
And so he or they have this system set up that's quite comfortable, you know?
Well, that's,
You know, like, and when you start to question, you know, is the universe really a good place to be? And, you know, as an example, or you start to question the system that's been set up for your pleasure. It doesn't, you know, it breaks everything. And if you don't have some ability to see things, to survive it, right? To ride the waves, to cultivate objectivity, it can be much harder than going with the flow, right?
Nietzsche said, well, if God didn't exist, we would invent him. And I think that in a way, these people who are going mad, they invent Mara. Mara, the one who leads us into unwholesome and destruction action. It's interesting too that Bhikkhu Nanamoli and Nanavira in the 1950s, they were very interested in existentialism. And actually a lot of existentialist German Buddhists went to stay with Nanavira, or they went after Nanavira passed away, after his demise.
And did you meet any of these monks? You were in Sri Lanka for some time.
Yeah. No. And because I was at the Forest Hermitage.
You were with Nyanaponika.
Yeah.
What was he like?
Well, yeah, let me start at the beginning.
Jumping all around.
There was a time then after I'd been in my career at the university for a long time and things were going very well when I met some people I had a boat in the Mediterranean by then. And I met some Dutch people and she was a Buddhist. She was an Indonesian Buddhist. And I said, you know, I want to go to Asia and learn more directly. The time has come.
This was after the accident. Was this shortly after the accident, or
a few years, I think, but not that long.
And so you had started really thinking about Buddhism or Asia in general.
Yeah, well, I knew that there was more there and that I had to do it. And I realized that maybe now was the time. I had a comfortable job. I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
But then after my time with the Venerable Nanaponika and Bhikkhu Bodhi, I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted to follow the path that they had explained to them by the Venerable Nanatiloka, who was Nanaponika's teacher. And so from that time on, about 1986, I was on the path.
This was starting in Sri Lanka.
Starting in Sri Lanka.
So these Dutch people totally suggested you go to Sri Lanka? That's where you started? Or?
Well, they gave me the address of a man. They said, write to Tisa, go to Tisa, and he will guide you. And we're kind of wandering around, and I lose the plot sometimes. But
okay, me too.
Oh, no, I lost it again.
But you got to Sri Lanka. You met this man Tissa, and
oh yeah, and so Tisa was driving me around at all the temples in Sri Lanka and explaining about the Theravada practice to me. And one day he took me to a place where there were some monks out in the countryside, where there were rock caves, and there was a rock dig out where there was water enough for them to live. And I was introduced to the head monk, and he was a meditator, and you could actually see the vibrations rising out of his body above his shoulders.
You could actually see this?
Yes.
Everyone could see this?
Yes.
Wow.
And he very kindly told me to go and see the German monk.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know anything about the German monk and who that was, but eventually Tisa took me to Kandy, and through the Buddhist Publication Society, we had a library down in the city. I was able to get permission to go up and visit them in the Forest Hermitage. And at that time, Venerable Nanaponika was about 86, and Bhikkhu Bodhi was staying with him. He was acting at that time as editor and president of the Buddhist Publication Society.
Bhikkhu Bodhi or Nyanaponika?
Bhikkhu Bodhi, because Nanaponika wanted to pass those duties to somebody who could do them and who could stay with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there I was, an innocent person, not knowing very much, at the feet of the two people who've done the most in translating the Pali Theravada texts into English at that time, and even up until today, especially Bhikkhu Bodhi, who carried on a tradition which came first from the Venerable Nanatiloka, went through Venerable Nanaponika, starting in about 1950. And then Bhikkhu Bodhi came when he was about 45 years old, 40 some odd years old. And from that time on until almost the end of the last century, Bhikkhu Bodhi spent all of his time translating the things that had not been translated yet.
So what was it like living with them?
Oh, I'd never seen such loving kindness and care and compassion. And I also met Venerable Ampitiasi Rahula, who was the monk at Peradeniya University, who was leading the vihara there, a great teacher of monks. And from that point on, I just decided I want to be like them. And I remember asking Venerable Nanaponika, what is the heart of Theravada Buddhism? And he said, why look anywhere but in the words of the master? And then he told me to read the book I mentioned already, The Word of the Buddha by Venerable Nanatiloka, which I did. And then after that, I read Bhikkhu Bodhi's book on the Noble Eightfold Path. And they knew that I was an academic, and Bhikkhu Bodhi especially took the time to, sometimes he would write down the titles and give them to me and say, no, you can find them down in the bookstore. So for the next 5 years,
5 years,
I kept, every winter I would go back to Sri Lanka. I would take a big pile of books with me and I'd read them all and come back with lots of questions. And really, they just changed my life. And finally, I realized what I had only had a glimmer of, that we create the quality of our own moments of existence in determining the kind of actions made. I won't say we make, because there really is no we. That's another thing that makes people feel uneasy. But if existence is just a psychophysical energy arising in the moment and disappearing, where is the existence? Where is the person? But if you know that's what is happening, and you go with it, and you're part of it, and it's, you know how to drive it. Now I'm thinking about driving a canoe or the raft or the boat. Then
this direction.
You finally know yourself how to get it to the other shore.
Let's just paddle in circles.
Yeah.
Because we don't realize what you just said. We don't realize it. We don't realize that we're creating our future. We don't realize that we're going around in circles.
Well, you know, remember when Ananda said that to the Buddha, that the holy life was very important? And Buddha said, not so, Ananda. The holy life is everything. Having a kalyanamitta, having
is everything.
A teacher
it's not just
who can show you noble friendship is everything.
Right.
And so
without it,
as a kid in Canada, before I went to McMaster, I didn't have the right kind of guidance.
Right.
Learning Western philosophy, I didn't find the answers, but I got some pretty nice hints.
That's what this guy today asked me. He's in Western philosophy. He said he wants to become a professor. And I kind of, before I knew that, I kind of dissed his whole dream, I guess, because I said, you know, he said, did you ever study Western philosophy? I said, a little bit. I'd read some, but I knew that I wasn't going to find it there. And I knew that university wasn't, I dropped out of university because I knew I wasn't going to find what I was looking for. It's just missing it, no?
What did he say?
Well, he didn't say anything, and then later on in the conversation, he told me that he's thinking of getting his doctorate in Western philosophy. But my teacher calls it. My teacher said it's like fruit tree in the forest, a fruit tree in the jungle. A fruit tree in the jungle is useless, you know, because if it's deep in the jungle, no one's going to eat the fruit. He said this is like he's thinking of the Jataka stories actually, but he said this is like Western people who are sometimes very, you know, they bear fruit, but because there's no one, because they're so far in the jungle, the fruit goes to waste. It gets rot. It just rots.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
There are people who, just for not hearing the words, are wasting away. That's what Brahma said, right?
But Schopenhauer was influenced by directly by Buddhism, or let's say indirectly by some translations in the Latin by Faust.
Okay.
And but then Schopenhauer in his own time was not understood.
No.
You know, and Hegel was the big man, and poor old Schopenhauer was a little bit like that tree. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then I think that Western philosophy, new groups of philosophers keep coming and destroying the old system, tearing it down, tearing it down, tearing it down, so that eventually what you learn is how to think.
Right. It's not a belief or a...
And it's like the Brahmajala Sutra. You look at all the possibilities,
Mm-hmm.
and then you say, but it's not one of them. What now?
Uh-huh.
And the Buddha comes. And he says, well, he explains what hasn't been looked at before.
And he shows you not belief, but he shows you reality.
That's right.
I want to, before we go into looking and see if people have questions, I wanted to come to your recent reality.
Oh.
And I mean, we talked a little bit about the accident, but recently you were in the hospital again. And now as a practicing Buddhist going back to the hospital. Can you give us some kind of comparison? Because now you're actually, you had restorative surgery for your heart, which was in trouble because of the accident.
Yeah, I had open heart valve replacement surgery. And I needed it because of that accident that I'd had 30 years before. My heart had to overcompensate because it had been crushed and it got too big. And so the hole in the valve was leaking because the cap on the valve was too small. And somehow they managed to open the heart and repair that valve. And I don't feel anything now. I feel a little arthritis, but that's really got nothing to do with it.
You're talking about that too, how it's not one thing, it's something else, right?
Yes.
They patch up one hole and another leak springs up.
But after I was released from the surgery ward, I went into a convalescent ward for, some people stay 3 months, most people, but I got out after 6 weeks. But in there, a third of the people were amputees, a third of the people were 80 and 90, and one or two, even 100. And I knew everybody's story, and I knew my own story. And I realized that now I was in the stage of old age, sickness, and death. I'm 75. I turned 75 last month. And it's natural that we come into that stage. If we see other people, that makes us realize even more clearly that this is life, this is a part of life. And two things you can say about that. One is, if you know that everything arises and ceases, and that life is life, and that a human life passes, and it's natural, and it's something that you don't need to hang on to, then you don't feel anxiety. You don't feel anything. You feel, if anything, a kind of relief that this suffering of this corporeal existence will end. But the energy goes on. That's the second thing, that you realize, you understand the Dhamma, that when the
Psychophysical, physical, mental.
when the psychophysical state no longer exists, the energy continues. And where that goes, nobody knows. But if you behave and you act in a way where you're constantly purifying your mind at the level of impulses, which precede inclinations, which precede mental actions, which precede physical actions, you can do that consistently enough, then you have a good chance of liberation, of being free, of being in a state where, I don't want to use the word nibbana because some monks say you shouldn't talk about it until you really know about it.
Yeah, I had to bring it up to this guy today. We were talking about, he said something about impermanence, and I said, I don't really know what you're talking about. And he said, well, don't you Buddhists say that everything is impermanent? And so I started talking about impermanence, and I had to qualify it. I said, because Nibbana is not impermanent, right? We have this exception. And so I kind of explained Nibbana, but then he was like, well, I don't really understand. I said, yeah, well, I mean, I don't really want to talk about it because Nibbana isn't something you can easily understand.
Buddhadasa, you know, that great Thai monk, he once said that to monks on their first day after they ordained, he said, don't ask about that yet.
Mm-hmm.
You're not ready.
Yeah, right. That's really it. It's not that it's mystical or belief. It's that it's like university study and you're in kindergarten.
Yeah, it's something you come to if you get that far. And if you don't, you have to try again.
So you were also in Thailand. Did you do studies there or practice there?
It's interesting, you know, because the teaching that really impressed itself upon me, I got in Sri Lanka.
Mm-hmm.
And after I got to Thailand, I followed the teaching that I had been taught, the teaching I had learned, the word of the Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's the same Pali text, it's the same tradition, but it's a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
In Thailand, there's so many good Buddhists. But sometimes there are twists which make it a little different. And I don't want to say anything negative about anybody, but I think in Thailand they have to do some sorting out, get back to the original teaching.
The neglected study, I think. Which you could say that they've done really well on the practice side, but if practice isn't rooted in study, it can get easily off track, right?
That's well said, yes, yes.
David, did you ordain during this time?
No. When I went to Thailand, in the 2005, my doctor said I was going to die in 3 to 6 months. And so I went and I stayed in a monastery. I've been invited to come to the monastery. They invite me to ordain because I wasn't physically fit. You know, a sick man cannot be ordained. And afterwards also, you know, I would like to be a monk, but there's some things that I can't do. Like you have to lift up your arm and fold your robe. That's part of the teaching, you know, you have to do this every day. Before meals, you have to do it. And there are things like that I can't do. I don't have the energy to do the pintapada, to do the walking. And nobody ever asked me specifically to become a monk. And I don't feel I should ask for someone to take me on and look after me.
So you were an anagarika then during that time, or a student?
Yes,
or
yes. In Thailand, I'm known as Anagarika Tevicho.
That's nice.
You're stressing the wrong syllable.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anagarika?
Yeah.
Anagarika.
Anagarika.
Thank you.
Latin has the same rule. Latin, it's the penultimate syllable if it's long. the anti-penultimate syllable if the penultimate syllable is short. Latin has the same rule. Sorry,
Thank you, Bhante.
being the pedant.
Little extra Pali lesson here. That's always good. So everyone treated you. They welcomed you, throughout this time as an anagarika.
Yes, and in fact, I've stayed in about 10 different monasteries, and basically I live like a monk, except now at the moment I'm not supposed to eat a lot at once, so I spread my meals out over, in small amounts. And since I can't follow the Vinaya exactly, then I guess I have to do the best I can, the best way I can.
Can I ask, one thing we were talking about today was Dostoevsky himself, his story, because he said he was a real good psychologist. He understood people's minds. And I said, yeah, he went through a lot, right? And he told me that when he was in Siberia, one of the tortures that they imposed upon him is they told him he was going to die. They told him they were going to kill him 2 weeks, in 2 weeks. They said, you're scheduled to be executed. And then in 2 weeks, they would put him in this pit or whatever, and they got the rifle squad all set up, and then they said, oh no, you've been pardoned.
I've heard that story before. Yeah.
True or not true? That's what he told me today.
Yeah.
So in relation to you, how does it feel to know that when the doctor says you're going to be dead in 3 to 5 months?
Actually, from the time I had this operation, the accident that led to the operation, they've been telling me that I'm going to die. So I've been preparing for death for actually 30 years since, it may be more than that, 1982.
It's got to be part of what gives you your
exactly
presence, your outlook on life. That
I'm friendly with death.
Yeah.
And now, it's getting better at the moment. But recently I've been through a lot of pain. Sometimes you wonder, you say, well, I have to take care of my body. I have to love myself. I have to do the best I can. But there's always that idea there that if death comes, there's the end of that suffering, the end of that pain.
Yeah.
But then you want to be sure that you've got the mental part in tune.
Yeah.
So that's what you think about if you're still on the path at that old age and dementia hasn't got you. I worry about that.
Yeah.
Not for myself so much, but for others. Like even a great monk.
Mm-hmm.
What happens then? What do you think?
Well, Mahasi Sayadaw was, he said he went brain dead. He had a stroke, I guess, and the brain just, or his mind left. They said the mind was no longer there. So he was in a vegetative state, and they had him on a life support system. But I guess he was in a coma, you could say. I heard this story. I thought it was quite interesting that they actually took him off life support. My teacher said you shouldn't take people off life support because you never know. And indeed, you never do. I mean, I don't have a real stance on the subject, but apparently people can come, it's rare, but can come back to life after months or, I don't know, years. Interestingly.
Well, the Buddha said there are a lot of questions we cannot answer. So it's okay to just leave some of them open.
No, but it's really it's something that makes you think about this profound experience of knowing death is coming. Because that's it, right? That's the experience that we all get in that last moment. Most of us don't get this experience of, I'm going to die.
Yeah, well, you got to keep the Dhamma before you,
Yeah. Marananusati, I mean, it's Marananusati. It's a big one.
But I feel that, I've lived a very full life. I'm satisfied.
Yeah.
If I can stay around another 10 years and do some good, I'll be happy.
Awesome. Well, here's hoping.
Yeah, well.
Okay, so let's see if we have any questions.
What was the name of the German monk that you had mentioned, David? Oh, okay, actually someone did put it there, Nanaponikatera. David, you said impulses precede inclinations, which precede mental actions, which precede physical actions. Is this something I can look for in meditation? How can I look for it?
That's the question. You said impulses precede inclinations, which precede mental actions, which precede physical actions. Right. I think he was talking about all those things preceding physical actions, like the mental actions. Like I thought that was really interesting as well. It's an interesting description of what we do. Is we look at, we try to catch before we do things, catch what's making us do them. Catch before the karma is created. And that's where we're acting in meditation.
That's right.
But you're asking you the question, so I hope I didn't just answer it there. But so is this something I can look for in meditation? So how does that arise in meditation?
Well, I think that the longer you practice and the more you concentrate, the more energy you put into it, the more focus you have, the better you get at it. So, when I was a young man, I had no idea. I couldn't have done anything like this. But over the years, I've learned, partly from my mistakes, partly from understanding the teaching and making the effort, so that I get to the point where in my daily life, that's my meditation. I'm always watching in every instant, if I can, what's happening, and try to keep the mind pure. Ishutimaga, that's
Clarification.
David, Aurora is saying hi to you.
Oh, hi,
Aurora? Actually, I think there's lots of people here that you know. Brenna is here, Aurora, Anthony.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here with you.
We're glad you're here. Lots of people listening. What do you think of the next statement, healthy mind and healthy body?
Well, they go together, don't they? At least you should live so that you have a healthy mind and healthy body, and that what the one is doing doesn't disturb the action of the other, so that you keep in harmony and balance. That's the middle path.
Sounds good. Are you familiar with Jnana Wimala? Sorry. Who is it?
Jnana Vimala.
Jnana Wimala.
Women monk.
I think I've seen the name,
Yeah, me too.
but
or
no.
did I meet him? I maybe met him. He's alive now, I think, right? Or I'm thinking of someone else.
Maybe I'm confusing it with the name I see on Facebook. Why do you
I'm not
ask?
sure who it is. It's one of the people listening was asking if you were familiar with this German monk who went on Tudong through Sri Lanka.
Oh, I think I read something about that.
So,
that doesn't surprise me.
Dutanga. The word is Dutanga. Tudong is a Thai word.
Hello, are you there? I can't hear you.
oh, I'm sorry. I was just waiting to see if someone else had a question before I butted in with my own questions. So, what were some of the most amazing things in Asia? So many of us would love to go there, have never been there, would love to go there. What would you really recommend if a person was going to go to Asia? What must you see?
Oh, that's a very big question. And,
what was your favorite thing then?
well, it all had to do with the Dhamma. I think my favorite time was when I went to Sri Lanka and I was received with such loving kindness. And I traveled around in Sri Lanka, which was in those days, back in the 80s, early 80s, it was still a kind of a paradise. And you're close to nature when you're out, on the sea where everything is untouched. And maybe there are coconut trees, but you don't really think of them as a farm. It's like you're there and everything is swaying and moving and you're a part of it, and you don't feel important. You just feel like you're part of nature. Actually, there is no existence, human existence. There's no me, I, and mine. There's just the psychophysical organism moving in nature. And the wondrous thing actually is that this element can be aware of itself. The reason we have that awareness is to be able to define ourselves.
It must be such a nice experience, such a relief to just feel that you're part of nature and not having to deal with everything that we deal with in society.
Well, I know you go camping out on the island in Maine.
That's why we do it.
Yeah.
Get away from it all. Do you feel the presence?
Anybody else out there?
Yes. Kalyanamito. Oh, I'm sorry. Sadhu Kalyanamito. This is from Brenna. So do you feel the presence of Buddhism in your life has profoundly affected it or even shaped it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm no longer that half-mad, wandering thing that I was when I was a young man.
Especially reading all the existentialism. I read that in college too. It's interesting, but it's also very depressing. It's so depressing.
Well, you can learn from it if it doesn't kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Again, come back to that thing that Alan Watts said.
Indeed.
What advice do you have for people who are thinking about going to Asia? It could be either about going to Asia, but a lot of the reason why they want to go to Asia is because there's nothing where they are. I get this question a lot. People don't have Buddhism around them, and so they think about going to Asia, but they don't know where to go.
It's very easy to go to Asia and fall into the wrong hands. Even to believe you're in the right hands. But you maybe find yourself in the hands of somebody who's not leading you far enough, or who's leading you a little bit astray. And so I don't know, it must be, why did I meet the people I met? Why did I find those teachers? That must have had something to do with karma. I think so.
Yeah, I was saying very similar things recently. I said, but it was in regards to a question about how are you going to find the right monastery? And I said, well, you may not,
Yeah.
And it's a good reason to sometimes work with what you've got, and actually, you might argue, be okay with a teacher who isn't perfect, because like if you go to Asia, not look too closely at the teacher. Okay, so they're not perfect, but you take what you can from them. But it is, you can fall into people who don't just lead you a little bit astray. You can fall with people who do lead you astray.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to the word of the Buddha. If you can follow exactly what the Buddha said,
right,
you can understand it and follow it with or without the help of a teacher. That's good.
Because he's our teacher, right?
But of course, what?
He is our teacher, of course.
Yeah, yeah. And you can become your own teacher, but it helps a lot to have a good teacher. You know, I still am such an impossible character. I need to have good people around me. And also it gives me a kind of feeling of sustenance to have that kind of noble friendship. Because to live with the Dhamma alone is possible. That's the only way you would want to live. But it's a little bit like being that tree with fruit in a place where you can't share it.
What would you advise to people who say they can't go to Asia? Who, I guess, cannot go to Asia because of the situation? I mean, obviously, we're not saying Asia is necessary, but who can't find a teacher?
I really don't know. I do not know. But I think if you look at the people, I'm talking now to Theravada Buddhists, I assume.
Mostly, yeah.
And so if you look at the people who've been influenced by that school in Sri Lanka, for example, or if you look at monks like Ajahn Chah, the Thai monk, Buddhadasa, Ajahn Lee, Ajahn Sumeto, they're all working within the same tradition. And in a way, it's better to hold on to the tradition than it is to the teacher. Because, you know, teacher worship is not the right thing. Teacher, respecting and loving and caring for your teacher and following your teacher because you know it's good, that's a good thing. But the teacher is just giving you the prescription that the Buddha gave to his disciples. And with the help of translators like Venerable Nanaponika and Bhikkhu Bodhi, the prescription is there for us to see and to find and to read and to follow if we get that far.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that should not be overlooked is the study of the texts, right? I mean, we're always down on study because we say practice is far more important, but what were we saying before the broadcast? I think we were talking about this. Without the study, we were saying we were talking about Thailand. Without the study, it's easy to go astray.
You know, it's interesting because I started out in philosophy, which is theoretical, and I found the answers I was looking for in the Dhamma. And then only after I was in did I really start meditating. Did I really see the point of doing it and the beneficial results that arise that come from it. That's why I do it. But
so you started out more on the study end and then added in meditation after?
Say again, Robin?
You started out on studying at first, David, and added in the meditation after?
Yes.
Interesting.
And that doesn't happen as often as the other way around. But there are people like me.
Every day we look at a new quote by Dhammika. You know the book by Dhammika?
Yes, he's a good monk.
So today's quote is when the Buddha was going to pass away, he said, "You may think that you have no teacher, but when I pass away, the Dhamma and the discipline which I have proclaimed, that will be your teacher. So wo mama chayena satha. That will be your teacher after I'm gone."
Oh, that's very apt.
Yeah, someone was saying that it's very apt for what we're talking about. Chayena satha.
Yeah, the Buddha came back to teach us out of love and compassion. That means you. That means every individual. It doesn't mean anybody special. It's for anybody who can take the medicine and use it to cure himself of the bane of suffering.
Yeah, someone was, one of the guys that was working with me at the Clubs Fest was asking whether a Buddha could arise now in these days. And I said, no, because we still have a Buddha here. And I said, which Buddha is that? I said, well, the Buddha who wrote these. And it was the texts that I had the texts. I said, the Buddha who wrote these. As long as these texts are here, we consider the Buddhas here. That's what this quote is saying, right? The Buddha is with us. It's called the Dhammakaya. This is the real meaning of Dhammakaya, the body of Dhamma. The Buddha had three kayas, the Namakaya, the Rupakaya, and the Dhammakaya. Right now, the Namakaya, the mental body of the Buddha is gone. Ceased. Gone to Nibbana. The Rupakaya is still here. We have the Dhatus. But we also have the Dhammakaya, which is the teachings. And that's part of the Buddha.
And that's what the Buddha discovered. And that's what he shares with us.
So really, there's no excuse. The Buddha's here. You want to learn.
But we have to clear the path. That's
Thank you again, David, for joining us.
Thank you, David.
I'm happy to be here.
It was very nice listening to this. Thank you.
And so maybe next week we have someone as well. Next week we're going to try to get Sister, what did you call her, Sister Valerie?
Yes.
Yeah, because the other name's a bit difficult. But Valerie is interesting. She's after I started practicing, she was the leader of the first Dharma group I ever went to at McMaster University, actually. She had a Dharma group just outside of McMaster University. She's now a bhikkhuni living up on the mountain above McMaster. Not a mountain, we call it the mountain, but it's higher land. The escarpment, right? So she might come. And also Bodhidharma has been in touch, right? So
yes.
this monk in the UK.
Venerable Bodhidharma is tentatively, if it's all right with you, I think scheduled for Saturday, September 26th, because he needs to be here a little earlier.
Sure.
Yes, Samantha is working
Sounds
out
good.
Samantha's working out the details, but I believe she was trying to set up for Saturday, September 26th, about mid-afternoon, 3 p.m. our time, I believe, so that it won't be too late on his end. I guess it was a bit much to ask someone to be up for an interview at 1 a.m. That's a little late.
Yeah, well, we will, let's keep letting people know, and especially the Europeans.
Yes.
That's his audience. And,
yes.
But everyone, we can ask him lots of questions. He's a teacher in the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition, so our assumption is it's going to be a lot like what I've been pushing on you all. So that'll be awesome as well. We maybe like to eventually get Bhikkhu Bodhi on here. Wouldn't that be something?
That would.
That would be lovely, yeah.
The other one is Bhante Gunaratana. I've been in contact with him. He's an interesting, you know.
Oh,
yeah.
I believe Bhikkhu Bodhi, doesn't he live at the monastery in Carmel, New York?
maybe he's there now, yeah.
I believe there's a monastery in Carmel, New York, that has the largest Buddha statue on the East Coast, or something like that. Some distinction. I believe that's where he resides. There's a website for it and everything, but I haven't been there, although it's close by. I should go sometime. They love visitors and all.
Everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again, David, and people were saying thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Bhante.
I think,
Good night.
good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.